Michael Weatherly is officially confirmed for a season-long arc as Tony Donazzo in NCIS Season 24. That much everyone already knows. But I don't think enough people are talking about why this specific decision at this specific moment might be the single most important thing keeping this entire franchise alive. Because the NCIS universe has spent the last year quietly bleeding in places most casual fans never noticed. And I honestly think Tony walking back through those doors is the first real fix CBS has made to a problem that's been building for a while. Let me lay out exactly what that problem is. What Tony's return actually solves. Why the timing of this decision is not a coincidence. Why the character himself is uniquely suited to fix a very specific writing problem the show has had all season. And why I don't think this is just nostalgia bait. I think it's a calculated rescue mission built on a strategy CBS has already proven works once before. First, the state of the franchise going into this renewal cycle, because I want to be precise about where the actual damage was, rather than just painting the whole universe as one collapsing thing. NCIS, Tony and Ziva, the Paramount Plus spinoff that finally gave fans the reunion they'd wanted for a decade. Tony and Ziva together in Paris, Tali's safe. The payoff of Season 11's twist and Season 17's revelation, all delivered in one series, got cancelled after a single season. Gone with no second chapter. NCIS. Origins and NCIS. Sydney have both been dealing with viewership numbers that, as multiple outlets reported late last year, were sparking renewal concerns. Multiple shows across the CBS drama slate. NCIS. Sydney, NCIS. Origins, Fire Country, Matlock, had their 2026-27 seasons quietly shortened. One fan comment on a TV series finale article about the renewal put it bluntly. NCIS franchise is failing miserably. That's one voice, not a verified trend across the fandom, but it captures a sentiment the ratings data was giving real ammunition to. And here's the part I want to be genuinely precise about, because it changes the shape of this whole argument. The flagship show itself was not the part of the universe in freefall. NCIS had gone through a real ratings decline in the years immediately following Mark Harmon's exit in Season 19, severe enough that CBS moved it off its longtime Tuesday home in 2024 to make room for the FBI franchise instead. But by the time we got to this renewal cycle, the mothership had already started recovering, bouncing back specifically once it began drifting back toward its old footing. The actual crisis, the part of this universe that was genuinely bleeding, was concentrated almost entirely in the spin-off ecosystem. Tony and Ziva canceled outright. Origins and Sydney both flagged for renewal concerns. Seasons quietly shortened across multiple shows in the same fall. So Tony's return isn't rescuing a dying flagship from the brink. It's reinforcing a flagship that was already stabilizing on its own, while giving the much shakier universe surrounding it, spin-offs included, brand new spin-off included, something strong enough to actually lean on. And I want to sit with just how much was riding on Tony and Ziva specifically, because I think its failure is the real hinge point of this entire story. That spin-off wasn't a side experiment. It was supposed to be the emotional culmination of one of the longest-running romantic arcs in television history. 10 years of fans asking when Tony and Ziva would finally get their ending. And CBS delivered it, and it still didn't survive one season on streaming. That is a genuinely alarming signal for a franchise this size, because it tells you that even giving the audience exactly what they said they wanted for a decade isn't automatically enough to guarantee survival anymore. Something had to change about the approach And here's what CBS did in response, and I think the sequencing matters enormously. First, they moved NCIS back to its original Tuesday 8 p.m. slot for fall 2026, an acknowledgement that the Monday experiment simply hadn't worked. Then they built an entirely new Super Tuesday lineup around it. NCIS at 8, brand new spin-off NCIS. New York at 9 with LL Cool J and Scott Conn and NCIS. Origins moved to 10, with Sydney pushed to mid-season to lighten the overall load. That's not a network coasting on a legacy brand out of habit. That's a network making a deliberate, structural, expensive bet that this specific night, with this specific lineup, is going to work. And Tony Donazzo is the anchor holding that entire bet together, which is exactly why the way Weatherly announced this mattered so much. He didn't do a formal statement. He posted a video on NCIS's own Instagram account, laughing, completely at ease, and said 6 words, "I'll see you in the fall." That's it. And it broke the internet before a single news outlet had time to properly cover the story because it was so completely, recognizably him, using the smallest possible amount of effort to say the thing that meant the most. Now, here's the first thing his return actually fixes on a practical level. NCIS. Tony and Ziva getting canceled could have meant that entire storyline. The reunion, Tali, Paris, everything that show spent a season building, just evaporated into streaming limbo, the kind of thing fans reference wistfully for years as the good ending that got taken away too soon. Instead, CBS is folding Tony directly back into the mothership. That's not just a consolation prize for fans who lost the spinoff. That's the network recovering the value of an investment that didn't pan out on Paramount Plus by bringing it home to the platform that's actually still working. Broadcast television, where NCIS still reliably pulls millions of live viewers every single week, and where live viewership still commands the advertising premiums that streaming numbers simply can't match. Nothing about that storyline has to be wasted. It gets a second life in front of a much bigger audience than the spin-off ever had access to. Second, and I think this is the part fans are underestimating the most, Tony solves a genuine structural writing problem the show has been sitting on unresolved for an entire season. The director's chair has been empty since Vance died in the season 23 finale, and showrunner Steven Binder has openly said in interviews that they're looking for a director who's also really involved in the cases somehow. Read that quote again slowly, because I think it is the single most revealing thing anyone connected to this show has said all year. That description does not really fit Parker, who has shown across multiple seasons that he'd rather be in the field than behind a desk. It doesn't quite fit McGee either, who has been positioned all season as the institutional heart and calm center of the team, rather than someone itching for an administrative promotion. But it fits Tony Donazzo almost too perfectly, a man who has never once in his entire career managed anything from a comfortable, safe distance. If Tony ends up in that chair, the show solves its biggest unanswered mystery from season 23 and its biggest casting coup for season 24 in the exact same creative move. That is efficient storytelling, and I don't think it's an accident that both threads are converging in the same season. And think about what that would actually look like on screen, because I don't think the dynamics have gotten enough attention yet. McGee, who has carried the institutional memory of this team for 23 years, suddenly navigating a working relationship with the man who was his senior field agent, back when McGee was a nervous probie who barely knew how to hold his badge. Torres, who has only ever known Tony through stories McGee tells on quiet nights when a case hits a wall, Finally meeting the legend in person, probably unimpressed for about 45 minutes before Tony does something that completely recalibrates his opinion. Palmer, who spent 13 seasons being genuinely close with Tony before he left, suddenly working alongside him again as two completely different men than the ones who said goodbye in 2016. None of that requires a single new villain or case of the week gimmick to be compelling television. That's just people and history and time colliding in one building. Third, think carefully about what Tony does for that new Tuesday lineup specifically, because the timing here is doing a lot of quiet work. NCIS. New York is launching completely cold. Brand new characters, a brand new city, a brand new team built from scratch. Anchored around Sam Hanna, another legacy character making his own comeback after years on NCIS. Los Angeles and NCIS. Hawaii, set up through an actual 2-part backdoor pilot embedded in season 23 itself. Having Tony DiNozzo simultaneously anchoring the 8 p.m. lead-in gives that entire night a spine of deeply familiar faces for lapsed fans to come back for, on the same evening, on the same network. This isn't one nostalgia play happening in isolation. It's two legacy characters on the same night, both designed with the same underlying purpose. To pull back an audience that quietly drifted away once Gibbs left the building and never fully found its way back. And there's real precedent here that I think proves this strategy actually works rather than just hoping it does, because CBS has essentially run this exact experiment once already. When Mark Harmon left in season 19, there was no definite plan in place for what came next. Executive producer Charles Floyd Johnson has said as much directly. And when Gary Cole was brought in as Parker, he was deliberately not pitched as the new Gibbs. He was pitched as someone who wasn't sure he'd even stay with the team. Specifically so, audiences wouldn't spend every episode measuring him against a legend. And it worked. Viewership actually went up after that transition, against nearly everyone's expectations, including Cole's own. CBS has already proven with hard data that the right personnel decision at the right moment can reverse a ratings slide that looked otherwise permanent. Betting on Tony now follows that same instinct, except this time they're not introducing someone new and hoping the audience adopts him. They're bringing back someone the audience already loves completely, with over 2 decades of built-in emotional equity that doesn't need to be built from scratch. And there's one more piece of this puzzle worth mentioning because it reinforces just how coordinated this whole franchise-wide strategy actually is. This same year, Mark Harmon is returning to NCIS Origins for every single episode of season 3, not a cameo, a full season-long arc as the older Gibbs, tied to a serialized mystery connected to his Camp Pendleton days. 2 legendary actors from 2 different eras of this franchise's history, both returning in the same calendar year, both anchoring different corners of the same Tuesday night lineup. That is not a coincidence. That is a network looking at its entire 50-plus-year-old franchise and deciding all at once that the fastest way back to health across the whole universe is through the people who built it in the first place. There's also the unresolved cliffhanger sitting underneath all of this that gives Tony's return an unusually loaded entry point into the season. Season 23 ended with Torres confronting McGee's son Mateo in a dark alley after Mateo pulled a gun on him, and a single gunshot before the screen cut to black. Binder has confirmed nobody died. Wilmer Valderrama himself, when asked at a press event, could only say he hopes Torres makes it out alive. which, for an actor who knows exactly what he's allowed to say, is about as loaded a non-answer as you can give. Whatever Tony walks into when season 24 opens, he's not stepping into a stable, settled team picking up its normal casework. He's stepping into an active crisis, a team processing real trauma, and a leadership vacuum that has been sitting open for months. That is precisely the kind of moment that makes a returning legend's presence feel earned rather than decorative. Now, I want to be honest about the other side of this, because I don't think it's a guaranteed fix, and I think pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Nostalgia only works if the writing around it actually earns its place. Tony walking back into a building that has changed this much. With McGee now the senior institutional figure, with Torres and Knight running things their own way, with an entirely new generation of agents who've never worked alongside him, needs to feel like a genuine reckoning, rather than simple fan service dressed up as a plot. There's also a real risk that a season built too heavily around one returning face ends up sidelining the current ensemble the show has spent years developing. Casey, Palmer, Knight, Torres all deserve their own forward momentum, not just reaction shots to Tony's homecoming. And there's still the unresolved question of whether Ziva comes with him, which the show is eventually going to have to address head on rather than quietly sidestep for an entire season. If Tony's arc ends up being 12 episodes of pure nostalgia with no real story attached to it, none of this actually solves anything long term. It just delays the same underlying problem by a year. But I honestly think the fact that CBS restructured an entire night of television, moved time slots, launched a new spin-off, delayed another one, and brought back two of its most beloved original stars in the same calendar year tells you they know exactly what they're doing here. This isn't a stunt casting decision buried in a random mid-season sweeps episode to spike 1 week's ratings. It's the centerpiece of a full, coordinated franchise relaunch, and every piece of it is landing in the same fall season on purpose. NCIS Season 24 premieres this fall on CBS Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by NCIS, New York at 9, and NCIS, Origins at 10. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Tony's return is enough to actually turn this franchise around? And do you think he ends up in that director's chair by the end of the season? Because I honestly think CBS built this entire fall lineup on the bet that the answer to both of those questions is yes.